First of all, I'd like to congratulate you for keeping your cool while you were being attacked. Secondly, I'd like to say there's so much misinformation, not only about healthcare, but how we got into this financial crisis. Because the country does not know that when President Obama took office, the wars that were not budgeted, nor funded, nor recorded, were included in his budget. So the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, which were included in his budget, which was presented to Congress, which was voted on, which effectively still has not been implemented, is the reason that we continue to have a partisan fight which divides the country and informs nobody. Secondly, unfortunately, the communication that comes out of our government is inadequate because we have pundits who talk about what Congress is doing. 90% of those pundits are wrong. And we have partisan news constantly that basically goes on and on to divide us. So my question is very simple.
Shut down the press.
My question is very simple. I'm a small business owner. I'm also the mother of the son who's in the back of the room. And his college room friend is with him. They've just graduated. And they don't have jobs. My question is, instead of trying to tell me what kind of birth control I should use, or whether or not I can have an abortion, I'm too old, what I'd like to know is, what is Congress doing to provide jobs so that we can have taxes that can pay for the police and the fire, and yes, indeed, to pay for the wars that we're in to protect ourselves as Americans?
Yeah. Not enough is the answer, and I'm sorry to say, and I don't want to say what I've already said over again because I want people to ask questions. But again, if it were up to me, I know that we're going to need to spend in the next 20 years a couple $1 trillion on investment in our infrastructure. We ought to be, building that Cross Harbor rail tunnel that'll take 18-wheelers off of 95. We ought to be renovating JFK Airport. This is investment. This is not wasted money. That would create a lot of jobs. I'm very happy, as I said before, that the transportation bill got done. For younger folks, this is a very, very difficult time. This is not an easy time to leave college and find a job. Two thoughts on that very quickly. One, we do need, and we have a deep national interest in making it easy for our kids to get educated. That, to my way of thinking, is the future strength of our economy. It's innovation, it's new businesses, it's dealing a little bit with the susceptibility to the misinformation that you were talking about. Let me tell you a quick story, though. I was at Jim Ippolito and Company in Bridgeport 3-4 weeks ago. They are making very finely engineered parts for Sikorsky helicopters. They're metal lathes and drill presses, all very computerized. He said, I'd hire 10 people tomorrow if I could find people with the skills. So it's not just making sure that each young person has the ability to get an education, but making sure that we're educating them in the right things. I mean, my head blew up when I heard that there were 10 jobs sitting there in Bridgeport, but he can't find the people with the training to do it. And so this is something that we need to focus on more. You know what that means? That means not just our universities, it means community colleges, vocational technical schools, this kind of thing to really train that whole workforce. And look, I don't want to let the things, Bob and I go back a couple of years and we get a little heated in our discussions. And I have a couple of observations on that. One, we're in a very polarized time right now, and there's a lot of anger. And you understand why there's a lot of anger. What we all just saw happen in the last 5 years, and let's not necessarily go through the exercise of pinning blame. It was a disaster. Millions of Americans who'd never heard of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch thrown out of work, lost their houses, sister lost her house. Now wait a minute, my taxpayer dollars are going to bail these institutions I've never heard of, and 3 months later they're paying each other $1 million bonuses? I mean, again, what I said before, that there was no violence in the streets, that's actually a real tribute to our democracy. We've been through a really, really tough time. But there's a lot more common ground, I think, than you might tell. Bob and I, again, do what we do in town hall meetings, but you know what? Most of us would agree that if you look at what they did in Europe, if we agree that we have a profound interest in fixing our deficit, we don't want our economy contracting by 5% a year. You can't fix your deficit when your economy is contracting by 5% a year. So my point is simply that we're in a very heated time right now, but I do sense that when we can have the calm conversation, there's more common ground, because at the end of the day, we're pretty practical, common sense Americans.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm
I'm Marcel Fontaine, and I'm part of the next generation and I'm a new voter, and I'm going to say that I'm very worried about the economy right now, and like since we have like now $15 trillion in debt. And basically, I feel that I'm going to be inheriting this, and basically, that's not fair and stuff like that. And basically, like, I won't even. I think that I would not even be able to retire and stuff like that because I don't think that that I'll even have Social Security because and stuff like that. And basically, I think that the main problems in this country is basically due to our lack of and respect of the Constitution and stuff.
Okay, thanks, Marcel. Look, you frame this in a way that we should all think about our debt.
Yeah.
You know, the United States will pay its debt. We will always pay our debt. The question is who in the United States will pay it. And when you start running up debt, what the government is doing, and at the end of the day, the government is responsible to the people, is when the government starts running up debt, I'm in my mid-40s. We're saying you're going to pay for the government benefit or the war or whatever, or the tax cut that I got to take advantage of. That's something that ought to make us all a little bit uncomfortable. So I'm glad you framed it the way you did. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we go the route that Europe did. In other words, if the President of the United States in January of 2009, with 750,000 jobs lost, said we're going to cut the federal budget in half, I think today we would be in a world like, by the way, we were in 1939, because we did that once before. In 1937, and by the way, the UK and Italy and Spain and these countries did it a couple of years ago and plunged their nations back into recessions. So the answer has always been, and I've said this for 3 years, which is in the near term, you put people to work, the way FDR did, building trails and highways and buildings. And while you're doing that, you come up with the kind of plan that I've been talking about all day today, the Simpson-Bowles plan, that puts your country on a stable fiscal course. I'm glad you closed with the Constitution because in the last 2 weeks we've seen our system work in ways that probably made everybody happy and everybody unhappy, right? Depending on how you felt about immigration in Arizona, you probably weren't, or the health care bill. But the point is that some very interesting combination of justices in our Supreme Court said this is constitutional and this is not, and nobody's entirely happy with the outcome, but we got a final answer from one of our 3 branches of government. Thank you.